Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at a 13-game win streak that I had in the Open Master League that helped me climb up to 3257 ELO, which at the time of recording is about top 250 in the world. The team consists of Rayquaza on the lead, Xerneas as the safe switch, and RHYPERIOR as the closer. This is my legend team from this season, and it's still incredibly strong. I found it to be one of the more flexible teams available in the Open Master League, as I'm able to do pretty well against good leads or bad leads. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out some highlights from the win streak. Hopping to the first match, picking up a terrible lead, Rayquaza into Zacian. Immediate save switch into Xerneas. My opponent is running Snarl on the Zacian, and they stay in to go for a Wild Charge. I'm not going to be shielding here. I tank a Wild Charge, they're probably just going for a Wild Charge and dip, and they do. In comes Groudon, and honestly, this is pretty good for me. My RHYPERIOR in the back really does not want to see the Groudon, so I don't mind seeing it here. Moonblast connects, opponent over farming and letting me make it to the close combat. I go for the close combat as soon as I get it. Even though I do throw on alignment in that situation, it's worth it, because if my opponent tries to throw in good timing, then I can actually force a shield. And now with a shield advantage, and with Groudon out of the way, things are looking a lot better for RHYPERIOR in the back. Groudon will go for the Precipice Blades, and Rayquaza is such a wall to Groudon, so I'm able to tank that no problem. When my opponent sends back in the Xerneas, I'm looking to switch into RHYPERIOR. Opponent sends in the Zacian, I bring in RHYPERIOR. Zacian going for the close combat right away, and I'm going to commit the shield. Close combat would do massive damage. Opponent staying in, so it looks like they're weak in the back to RHYPERIOR, and my opponent is going to fire off another close combat. I think I can farm down here. Do 3 Mud Slaps KO. They do not, and they make the close combat. Disaster has struck. Opponent does big damage. In the back, it's the Olga, and despite that massive misplay by me, this game is still winnable, as now I can just breaking swipe after breaking swipe after breaking swipe. 2 breaking swipes from RHYPERIOR, the switch back into Rayquaza, and we have the energy stored from earlier by farming down that Groudon. Opponent is now debuffed. 3 times, make that 4 times as I'm able to fire off another breaking swipe. That's gonna get Dialga low. Dialga fires off the last second charge move, but they cannot get to 2 Iron Heads. They go for Iron Head number 1, but they're not gonna get there. RHYPERIOR gets the farm down, and despite the terrible lead, we take the win. Picking up a pretty okay lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Palkia. Both of us are hitting each other for super effective damage in this matchup. As you can see, the Rayquaza's health is going down faster than the Palkia's, but I will be able to apply pressure with the breaking swipe. Opponent shields with the Palkia. Palkia going for the full farm down and gets the farm down. I'm going to be sending in Xerneas. My opponent ends up pivoting into Lugia, so a pretty nice read by my opponent as they understand that Palkia's energy is going to be more useful not against the Xerneas. Moonblast will connect. I'm farming up energy with the Xerneas. I'm going to switch into RHYPERIOR as my opponent will fire off the charge move. Is it the Aeroblast? Yes, it is. So that's a pretty nice catch there, as Aeroblast, of course, is going to be resisted. And now I can continue to farm up with RHYPERIOR. Opponent is going to go for another charge move, but this is only a Sky Attack. I can withstand the Sky Attack damage perfectly fine, and then I'm going to go for the Rock Wrecker. Rock Wrecker will hit for massive super effective damage, knocking Lugia out of the sky. Opponent has the Palkia, and Palkia has energy. The fact that they're sending in the Palkia here, it feels like they're weak in the back to RHYPERIOR, so I'm going to shield not once, but twice, so I can debuff whatever is in the back. Let's see, what do they have? They have Ho-Oh. I'm building up to the Rock Wrecker, and I'm baiting with the breaking swipe. Rock Wrecker would one-shot, so the opponent is going to commit the shield. I bank the breaking swipe, and I send in Xerneas. This is Xerneas' hardest counter, Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is going to go for the Earthquake. That does quite a lot of damage, and I'm going to be firing off this Moonblast. Moonblast is going to connect. Of course, it doesn't do a lot of damage to Ho-Oh, but at this point, I just need to get chip damage to put it into a range where a breaking swipe will KO. Moonblast connects. Opponent has to throw energy here, or I would make it to a close combat that would be lethal. They go for the Earthquake. I send in RHYPERIOR, go for 1 Mud Slap and the breaking swipe, and this is it. It has to KO, and it does, and we're able to take the game. We see a nightmare lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Togekiss. I'm going to immediately save switch into Xerneas, and my opponent is staying in this matchup with the Togekiss. Honestly, this works out pretty well for me, as Xerneas can do pretty decently here, and so can Rhyperior. It feels weird to say that a Mud Slap user does well into a Flyer, but Rhyperior does have quite a few win cons into Togekiss, because Rock Wrecker does absolutely massive damage. Opponent goes for the Ancient Power, does not get the boost. I'm able to make it to the Moonblast. Unfortunately, I was doing these battles live on stream, so my screen mirror disconnected because I accidentally unplugged the cord, but I get it plugged back in comes Excadrill, and close combat will be shielded. Exca has a lot of energy, and Exca with energy is a bit tricky now that Xerneas has been KO'd, but I have Rhyperior with a shield advantage, so I'm just going to be shielding up drill runs here, and then just debuffing them with Breaking Swipe. That's the nice thing about having 2 Breaking Swipe users on the team, is if you don't really want to take charge moves, you can just debuff them so they do less. This Breaking Swipe will get Exca low. Exca is 2 off the move, so I farm up, switch into Rayquaza. Not only do we catch the drill run, but I'm able to get them to basically 1 HP. In the back is Reshiram. Reshiram, I feel, is probably the most underrated Master League Pokemon at the moment, and is one of the reasons why having a Rhyperior on the team is really nice, because it's really hard to shut down Reshiram. Reshiram is debuffed here. They go for the Draco Meteor. That does massive damage, but Rhyperior is extremely bulky, able to withstand the -1 Draco and take the win. We see a decent lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Mewtwo. Rayquaza is able to win the 1 shield and the 2 shield versus Mewtwo. The only even shielding scenario that Mewtwo wins is the zeros, so I'm just always going to shield the first move that they throw. Then I can start going for Breaking Swipes, but my opponent makes a very nice catch as they catch my Breaking Swipe onto the Zacian where it's double resisted. That's very unfortunate, as that wastes energy for me. I'm going to rebank the Breaking Swipe for later and send in Xerneas. Opponent is going to go for the Play Rough. Play Rough, not the greatest move ever, and it is debuffed by the Breaking Swipe, so Xerneas able to tank it like it's nothing. Xerneas fires off the Moonblast. That does big damage to the Zacian. Unfortunately, it is just outside of Geomancy farm down range. They're going for another Play Rough. Play Rough is going to get Xerneas low. I'm not going to be able to farm down, so I'm forced to go for the Close Combat. Close Combat into the low health Zacian will be no shielded, and I win switch. In comes Mewtwo. Mewtwo has energy. I'm going to send in Rayquaza, and my opponent has another Psy Strike loaded. I'm forced to burn the final shield. I'm farming up, and here, honestly, I could have done one more Dragon Tail and gone for the Breaking Swipe. I had lost track of their energy, so I wanted to guarantee that I could get a debuff off. They shield, they're going for the Psy Strike. This is debuffed. I'm going to watch for a switch into something like a Dialga that could snipe the energy. I see in the top right, they go into the Dialga, so I fire off the Breaking Swipe, and now I can send in Rhyperior. Rhyperior going for the Breaking Swipe as soon as it gets it. My opponent is now going to be 2 stages debuffed onto the Dialga. Dialga, Iron Head not going to cut it here. They have to go for the Draco Meteor. Draco Meteor, an immensely powerful move, but due to the 2-stage debuff and the bulk of Rhyperior, Rhyperior tanks the move, Mud Slaps down, and leaves with the Breaking Swipe loaded to take down the Mewtwo and get the win. I see a very favorable lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Giratina. This entire team does pretty well into Tina. Opponent save switches into Dialga, and I'm going to respond with Rhyperior. In this situation, like switching out of a lead matchup, my opponent gets a 1-turn switch, and if they get a 1-turn switch, then you can throw 1 Dragon Tail, bring in Rhyperior, and Mud Slap all the way down. The opponent dies with the second Iron Head every single time. However, if the opponent gets a 0-turn switch, let's say they switch immediately after throwing a charge move, then as the Rhyperior, you do have to throw or the opponent will make the second move. But since they switched right from the lead, it's the 1-turn switch. I leave with a truly overwhelming amount of energy on the Rhyperior. I make it to 3 Breaking Swipes before they make a move, switch into Rayquaza, and snipe. In the back, it's Melmetal, and this game is over for my opponent, as I'm just going to commit debuff after debuff after debuff onto this Melmetal, and Melmetal has nothing it can do to reset those debuffs. Melmetal is going to fire off the Rock Slide. It is debuffed, but that still does a lot of damage, as Rayquaza, definitely not the tankiest Pokemon around. I can let this go, and now just bring in the Rhyperior, as Thundershock is never going to be able to get rid of the Rhyperior. I can just commit the shield and just debuff and continue to chip away at the HP with the Breaking Swipes. This is a very unfortunate endgame for my opponent, as they just have nothing they can do to win at this point. I'm farming up. I'm just going to switch into the Xerneas to force them to throw energy, and at this moment, the opponent staying into the bitter end, they end up going for the double debuffed resisted superpowers at the end. With no ability to switch out, the Breaking Swipe debuffs are just way too oppressive, and the win streak continues. We see the Dream lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Groudon. Opponent is going to save switch into Dialga, and same play as last game, where since my opponent gets the one-turn switch off the lead, I can throw one Dragon Tail, send in RHYPERIOR, and fully commit to the farm down, while only having to expend one shield. My opponent is going to die with this Iron Head, and now my opponent is going to be sending back in the Groudon. Groudon, of course, does do very well into RHYPERIOR. I can throw 3 Breaking Swipes here, and they're going to be able to tank that damage very comfortably. However, I am not about to let my opponent farm me down. I'm going to be firing off the 3 Breaking Swipes, and then instead of letting them farm me down, I'm actually going to give up switch. The play here is normally Xerneas into the Groudon is a very poor matchup, but after I've debuffed him 3 times, it's a very good matchup, so my opponent is forced to switch out. I get the alignment that I want anyway, and now I have an energy lead over the Zacian in the back. Whereas if I just stay in and let the RHYPERIOR get farmed down, then I'm in an awkward spot where Zacian not only has a shield advantage, but it has an energy lead as well. So I'm in a way better situation now. I decide to go for a close combat bait. My opponent really needs to keep the Zacian alive, so they will commit the shield. I am at the Moonblast, so I'm going to be committing the shield and then going straight for the Moonblast here. Moonblast will not KO, but it's going to do a lot of damage. Moonblast into the Zacian, it's gonna hurt. Switch timer up, back in comes RHYPERIOR, opponent cannot farm down, in comes the Groudon, and Groudon will fire off energy. But this is fine, as I have a hard wall to Groudon on the lead with my Rayquaza. I can send in Rayquaza, tank whatever they throw, commit to the farm down, and leave with the Breaking Swipe loaded, and Breaking Swipe is going to secure the victory here against the Zacian. Back in comes the Zacian, Breaking Swipe may be double resisted, but the Zacian runs out of HP, and we take the win. We see a slightly positive lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Solgaleo. It did take me some time to figure out how to play the matchup as the Rayquaza, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of how to play it now. You start by going for the Breaking Swipe as soon as you get it. This is very important as you want to limit the damage output from the Solgaleo. Solgaleo, whether they go for multiple Iron Heads or whether they go the route of just going straight for the Psychic Fangs, you're still in a pretty okay spot now, because you've lowered their attack before they're even able to get any damage on you, and now this third Psychic Fangs is a CMP tied to the Dragon Ascent. My opponent recognizes that and they go for the extra, but this Dragon Ascent KOs unless they shield, so as the Rayquaza you can guarantee either switch advantage or shield advantage. I'm now going to send in RHYPERIOR, opponent firing off the energy. I do live in Iron Head, so I'm going to let this go. Iron Head will connect. I get the farm down. Opponent, what are they going to be sending in here? They send in Rayquaza. I'm farming up with RHYPERIOR, and I'm going to make it to the Rock Wrecker. And here, I'm going to make a pretty massive mistake in this game. Instead of banking the energy and switching, I go for the Rock Wrecker. This is a problem because this Dragon Tail KOs, and now I have no ability to reset debuffs on Xerneas. So my opponent is going to go for the Breaking Swipe right away. This is like last game where my opponent only had one Pokemon and I was able to apply a bunch of debuffs. The good news for me is that if they're leading Solgaleo, they're probably pretty weak to Xerneas in the back, and this opponent is no exception, and we get an attack fall from the Moonblast. I believe that's like a 12% chance. So a bit of RNG goes our way, but even without the debuff, we're in a pretty good spot here as Xerneas has 2 shields to hide behind. This move is still not going to KO. Opponent baits with the Dragon Claw. I can go for the Moonblast. Moonblast into the Giratina Altered. Giratina Altered is very tanky, but that will get the KO. Back in comes the Rayquaza, and this Moonblast is going to secure the KO. So a bit of a misplay by me there in the mid game, but thankfully, once the Solgaleo is out of the way, Xerneas is extremely strong into my opponent's backline. Hopping to the final match, we see a tough lead Rayquaza into Dialga, and this is the game where the win streak ends. I save switch into Xerneas, and my opponent has a backline Ho-Oh to meet the Xerneas. This is Xerneas' worst matchup in the Master League, as everything it throws is going to be resisted. Ho-Oh, more commonly found on the lead this season, which is part of why I've had a lot of success with safe switching to Xerneas, but in this case, there's a Ho-Oh in the back to greet it, so I'm in a tough situation. I'm going to be firing off the Moonblast. Unfortunately, the screen mirror disconnects again. I'm able to reconnect it real quick. As I mentioned, these battles were done live, and I was trying out a new screen mirror, so unfortunately, a couple times in these battles, the screen mirror does briefly disconnect. They go for the Brave Bird. I need to preserve HP, so I am going to commit the shield, and I'm going to be firing off the Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe into the Dialga is going to deal some solid damage. I continue to farm up, and I'm going for another Breaking Swipe. I'm expecting my opponent to shield here if they want to preserve the Dialga, but they actually let that through. I send in Rhyperior, the Mud Slap goes through, and this will KO. This means I get to debuff whatever they have in the back. What is it? It's a Lugia, so the opponent was triple weak to Rhyperior, but unfortunately, I did not know that, and save switching the Xerneas put me in a situation where I had to be down a shield. And down a shield, this is looking tough. I go for the Breaking Swipe right off the bat. Opponent calls the bait, as it's pretty obvious that I'm just going to be going straight for the debuff. But now I build up again to the Rock Wrecker. I go for another Breaking Swipe, and this Breaking Swipe will be shielded. I continue to farm as Rhyperior. I make it to the Breaking Swipe. Let's see. Is my opponent going to shield? Yes, they are. They're now 3 stages debuffed. In comes Rayquaza, and this is going to be tough. Rayquaza committing the shield. I think I have to commit to the Dragon Ascent here. Dragon Ascent will secure the KO. Opponent going for the Sky Attack, and unfortunately, even at -3, this is still going to do too much damage. I decide to go for the Breaking Swipe, but as you're going to see, it's too little too late as Lugia farms down, and unfortunately, the 13-game win streak comes to an end, but we do make it to 3257 ELO. All in all, I believe that this is one of the strongest Master League teams that you can run at the current moment, with the added caveat that learning the matchups and how to play the team is extremely important. For example, understanding that for the Dialga safe switch, you can throw one Dragon Tail and just commit to the one shield farm down with Rhyperior puts you in a really good position where you're down a shield, but you leave with pretty close to 100 energy, and Rhyperior energy is very hard to punish in the Open Master League. On top of that, just learning those matchups and getting comfortable with the Pokemon is something that I've had to do over the course of the season, because this season with the Rhyperior update is when I made the team, and honestly, I feel like the team has only gotten stronger as the season's gone along. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.